Hello, welcome to the Psychiatry Grand Rounds today. Thank you all again for braving the snow this week. It's been another pretty rough week here, but we really do appreciate you all being here and tuning in by remote location for those of you all watching us on the computer. Today, we'd like to give a very warm welcome to Ms. Carter Florence. She is a graduate of Center College, where she received a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry. She also received her Master of Public Health in Community and Behavioral Health here at East Tennessee State University in 2013, and she is currently enrolled in the Doctor of Public Health Community Health Program here at ETSU. She will be talking with us today about some interesting findings of tanning behaviors, and I know I'm really looking forward to the talk. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Dr. Hopkins. Thank you all for making out on a rather odd week and a very snowy one at that. I was personally very disappointed to see it snowing at 8 o'clock this morning again. I have no financial disclosures. I'm in grad school. And then I always like to give a brief outline of what I'm going to talk about before we dive in, so you can kind of follow along and know when I'm going to stop talking. When I get to the indoor tanning in the news, that's when you all can tune back in. I hope you all pay attention throughout the conversation. But it is a really interesting topic that a lot of people don't think a lot about. I personally didn't think a lot about indoor tanning until about 3 years ago when I joined Dr. Hillhouse's lab here at the university. And I will refer back to him and his work throughout our conversation. You can't talk about indoor tanning without talking about skin cancer. That's the major public health problem associated with indoor tanning. So I'm going to give you kind of a 30,000-foot view of skin cancer. We'll look at the burden of disease, go into indoor tanning itself, the behavior, which is kind of fascinating, actually. You don't have to admit being an indoor tanner, but I would not be surprised if any of you all had indoor tan. I'm constantly amazed at how varied indoor tanning is and what population it takes place in. Then we'll get into what I think may be of interest to y'all, the idea of indoor tanning dependence, or that it could be a dependent behavior. And then I'll briefly touch on indoor tanning in the news because it's making a lot of newsworthy events. So to get started, what is skin cancer? Why do we care? And how do we prevent it? The journal that is pictured here on the left, it's actually the Surgeon General's Call to Action to Prevent Skin Cancer, which came out in July. Y'all may be familiar with this kind of a document. It's often published around a very big health topic. Cigarette smoking and tobacco use was one of the big ones for lung cancer. And I'd like to encourage you all to use this as a resource if you are interested or need to counsel against skin cancer or against behaviors that may increase your risk for skin cancer. It's a very well thought out document that shows some gaps and identifies some goals to reduce skin cancer, one of which is indoor tanning. So skin cancer is the most commonly diagnosed cancer in the United States. But more important than its incidence is the fact that it's a preventable disease. We know that health behaviors cause a large number of health concerns, cancer being one of those, and we can prevent skin cancer. We can do that by reducing UV exposure. To give you a brief overview of types of skin cancer, we have basal cell carcinomas, which are the most common and least aggressive types of cancer. I have one pictured here. They're commonly seen in older men and women. They're really fairly common and can be usually excised and not lethal. Although the incidence has doubled in women under 40 in the last 30 years, which I think is interesting to notice. Then you have squamous cell carcinomas. These are the second most common type of skin cancer, and they are more aggressive than basal cell carcinoma, and they can be deadly. 700,000 cases each year, usually of squamous cell carcinoma, with as many as 2,500 deaths associated with it. Basal cell and squamous cell carcinoma make up your non-melanoma cancers, skin cancers, so you'll often hear them reported as that, kind of the non-melanoma skin cancer. Indoor tanning is associated with both basal cell and squamous cell carcinomas. Here we go. Melanoma, the third and most deadly form of skin cancer. It's the most aggressive. It is the least common, although incidence is on the rise. And it's the most common cause of cancer in women aged 25 to 29, which I think is important to keep in mind. And it is increasing significantly, about 6% annually, incidence rates are. In 2012, there were almost 10,000 estimated deaths from melanoma, which you can see here. So basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma are not routinely tracked by state registries. You can find their incidence rates. You just have to do a little bit of digging. Again, that Surgeon General's call to action actually provides great places for where to find those if you're interested. But melanoma is tracked. Here in Tennessee, melanoma is the 5th most common cause of cancer. It's higher in Northeast Tennessee than in other areas of the state, which may or may not come as a surprise to you. Again, not all skin cancer is associated with indoor tanning, but it is associated with UV exposure. So that could be from outdoor work exposure. You see it commonly in field workers as well as in other populations. Skin cancer in adolescents is high, and skin cancer is, again, that most common in young adult females. So I think it is important to remember that it can affect younger populations, not just older ones. So what can we do about it? Again, most common cause of cancer. These are all from the Skin Cancer Foundation. It's one of their kind of overviews of facts about skin cancer. But there are certain things that put you at greater risk for skin cancer, which include burns on your skin, which can happen with indoor tanning or just with daily use. So your risk for melanoma doubles if you've had more than 5 sunburns in your entire life. I don't like using that statistic with a lot of people because I think it puts that thought of, well, I'm screwed. I've done that. I've had more than 5 burns. What am I supposed to do about it? You're talking to a very fair person who has certainly had that many burns. But you can counsel around protecting yourself from this point forward and knowing the risks and knowing the signs of skin cancer and knowing when to go to your doctor soon. And I also want to highlight here the realization that people who first use a tanning bed before the age of 35 increase their risk of melanoma by 75%. So what to look for if you are concerned with a spot or a mole or something on your skin? You want to follow your ABCDEs. I wish it was the ABCs. It's a little bit easier to say that. You want to look for asymmetrical shape of a mole or a spot. The borders should be smooth. They should not be jagged. Your color, although there can be benign, oddly colored moles like a blue nevi, they are something that dermatologists tend to take off and not like as much. Diameter, larger diameters are a little bit more scary than smaller ones. And any form of evolution, so if it's changing at all, if that spot changes at all. If you have any concerns of those, go see your doctor. If your patients have any concerns of those, send them to see their doctor. That's pretty much my spiel for that. So what do we know about skin cancer and indoor tanning? In 2009, the International Agency for Research on Cancer determined that there was enough evidence to label indoor tanning beds as carcinogenic. So that was a big leg up for research on indoor tanning and skin cancer because we had the epidemiological proof to show that indoor tanning can and does cause cancer. In the US, Australia, and Northern and Western Europe combined, there are more than 400,000 cases of cancer annually that are linked to indoor tanning. That's a lot of cancer. That's a lot of cost associated with cancer. Perhaps more powerful than that is a recent epidemiological study that came out in 2014 that showed that more individuals will develop skin cancer due to tanning bed use than will develop lung cancer from cigarette smoking. That's a really powerful finding. In public health, our big 3, obesity, physical inactivity, and smoking cessation. We do that left, right, and center. Our commissioner for the state of Tennessee around health. Those are his big threes. We know that we have a potential here for a big four with indoor tanning. So I would encourage you to pay attention and be aware of that. I notice indoor tanning salons so much now. There are at least 4 within, I would say, a half-mile radius of the building that we're sitting right now. And those are specifically salons, not non-salon locations, which could be someone's home or a gym. And we'll talk a little bit about that later because, frankly, I find it interesting. So what do we know about the behavior of indoor tanning? We understand now that skin cancer and indoor tanning are linked, but what do we know about the actual behavior? What does it look like? 30 million people tan annually in the United States. 2 to 3 million of those are teens. Remember that statistics that said that your risk of melanoma increases by 75% if you have a first tanning exposure before the age of 35? Okay? That's really concerning to me. But what I think we don't understand well in the literature and what we're not capturing yet is that not all individuals tan equally. Not necessarily, and I don't mean the color of their skin. Clearly, we don't all tan to a different color. I'm talking about how they actually engage in the behavior. You'll hear us refer to event tanners. How many people tan before a wedding? Well, I don't, but others may. How many people tan before prom, especially in your adolescent population? Then you have your seasonal tanners. Oh, it's spring. Let's get ready for summer so we don't burn. Let's tan in the spring. Then you have your winter tanners who tan because of the winter blues. It's cold outside. It's snowy. Let's go sit in a really warm bed for 15 minutes and have that really nice, relaxed feeling afterwards. People in rural areas tan a little bit more frequently than people in urban areas, which I find interesting. Males tan too. This is not a female-specific behavior by any stretch of the imagination. It's significantly less in males, but it is very common in males. You'll hear males talk about, older males talking about tanning for pain relief. Perhaps they've had an injury in the mines and they'll have tanning. So I want to encourage you to think about the fact that indoor tanning is not necessarily something that you do Monday, Wednesday, Friday after work, although it can be. So why do we tan? I alluded to several of these already, and we're going to look at each of these very closely because I think they're of interest. I find this totally fascinating. This is just a really unique behavior, in my opinion. So appearance, relaxation, stress reduction, medical reasons, whether self-prescribed or doctor-prescribed, parental influences, peer influences, and media influences. So again, we're going to look at these individually. So tanning and appearance, the idea of a tan skin is more attractive. Over time, skin ages and loses its youthful appearance. We all know this. Wrinkles around the eyes, fine lines around the lips, age spots on the back of hands. That's natural aging. That actually quickens with tanning, okay? Which is something I would encourage you all to take that message home to individuals. A base tan is not a protective tan. A tan is a scab. It's damaged straight up. And the idea that in the short term you're going to be more attractive with a tan can be counteracted with the message that in the long term you're actually going to age yourself faster, okay? So there is that kind of appearance focused. A lot of people report tanning because they feel more attractive. They feel more confident in their look. Body image and depression have both been associated with indoor tanning. Tanning and relaxation. It's a beach in a box. We literally heard that from a participant in one of our studies. Okay? It feels fabulous. You're in a small enclosed places. It's your me time. It's that relaxation. It's your 15 minutes of time out of the day that you take just for yourself. There's evidence that endorphins are released during the tanning process. And if you think back to the last time you were at the beach and you were out in the sun, it does feel good. I'm a sun baby. I love it. I love laying out in the sun. I love spending time out in the sun. Typically do it under an umbrella with SPF 50, reapplied every 2 hours, and at least 1 ounce on the entire body. But I do love being out in the sun. There is that relaxation of getting that heat in your body, and it's just really wonderful. Interestingly, if people report tanning for relaxation purposes, appearance-focused messaging will actually help with that as well. So we have seen that in the literature. June Robinson and her group did that. Tanning for medical reasons. This is one that you hear a lot. Has anyone heard of the debate around vitamin D and indoor tanning? It's commonly used by the tanning industry to promote indoor tanning. Indoor tanning beds are not a good source of vitamin D. You can get vitamin D from just your routine activity outside or from your diet. Indoor tanning beds are not a good source of vitamin D. These are all conditions or reasons that I've heard in my own research that people self-report using. Some people do say that their doctors recommended for psoriasis. That may have been 20 years ago as opposed to last year. We're not really certain. We don't ask that. Seasonal affect disorder is one that I hear a lot of people reporting that they're tanning to help with their seasonal affect disorder. Indoor tanning beds do not treat seasonal affect disorder. Your eyes have to be open, from my understanding, to treat seasonal affect disorder. You don't tan with your eyes open. Typically, you wear goggles if you're following FDA guidelines when you tan. Although you typically tan in the nude or with very little clothing on. So, anxiety and depression have been associated with indoor tanning. And again, getting back to that joint pain, thinking about perhaps your coal miner or somebody who's injured on the job. And acne is one that a sorority sister always used to talk about tanning for. So what about tanning and parental influences? Families matter. Family structures matter in behaviors in general. You'll see in the alcohol literature how much a parental influence can have on a young adolescent going into college for drinking. Similar behaviors can be seen here with parents and tanning. We understand a lot more about the maternal influences of tanning than we do paternal influences, although I do want to make mention of the fact that families own tanning beds in their home and may be kind of having a family, the family who tans together kind of effect may be actually occurring. One of our participants talked about her mother heating up the bed in the morning before going to school so that she could get out of bed and get into the tanning bed where it was warm to wake up more nicely before school. I thought that was kind of interesting. And again, kind of the idea that males and females would be using the bed in the home. Dr. Baker, who is here at the university, found that the age of initiation is younger if the mother is present at the first tanning session in adolescence. So your mom takes you to tan. Your mom pays for you to go tanning. And you're more likely to be a heavy current tanner if your mother was first present or present at that first tanning session. That was the case in the study that Dr. Baker completed back in 2010. You're actually 4.6 times more likely to be a heavy current tanner when it was a college-age population. And the age of initiation was about 2 years younger, looking at 14 instead of 16. So, tanning and peer influences. We work a lot with adolescent populations, and so a lot of my research is focused on that. And these are the idea that teens who tan perceive their friends to tan, and they perceive it as being socially better if they're tan. There's also some qualitative data about the idea of tanning as a social behavior, going in groups to tan. I don't know if any of you all use the gym here, but you'll often hear groups of women in particular talking about going to the gym and then going to tan afterwards, or having come from the tanning bed and then going to the gym. And it's that very social kind of experience, although I think that's more likely true in female populations than in males. So, tanning in the media. I love this slide. I just thought it was the greatest picture ever when I found it. I was like, oh, that's perfect. You can blame it on Coco Chanel. In the 1920s, Coco Chanel accidentally got burned on the French Riviera, and tanning became popular. That's basically what we think when you look at historical data, which I think is utterly fascinating. You look at art from centuries ago, and Rubenesque, this pale, beautiful, busty woman, and now you look at maybe the early 90s, and you get the Baywatch beach babe, who's tan, super skinny, also very buxom, but just the perception of what beauty is has changed a lot. And I will say that I think that it is swinging back towards fair skin, or perhaps not necessarily fair skin, but natural beauty. Pale is not a word that we like to use. People don't relate well when you say, oh, you look so pale. It's a sickly thing. We've had when we've talked in cognitive interviewing about, we wanted a campaign, pale is pretty. Yeah, that doesn't work. Fair or natural is beautiful is really better. And if you think about actresses today and media personalities, Anne Hathaway, Nicole Kidman, these are very fair-skinned women who are seen as models. So I think there is a shifting view in tanning in the media. So I've spent a little bit of time giving you an overview of skin cancer, a little bit about the indoor tanning behavior. It's so varied and unique to individuals. It's really just fascinating. Although appearance-focused messaging is really key when counseling against indoor tanning. And I would encourage you to kind of, not used to this. So we understand a little bit about the tanning behavior. We know that tanning is associated with skin cancer, so why do we still do it? It's bad for us, right? So one researcher talks about the risk-reward, kind of understanding that, yeah, that'll happen to me eventually. But right now, it's so much better if I'm attractive, if I perceive myself as having this better look. And so the risk-reward is just kind of, it's not there. It doesn't balance out. But then you talk to people who have had skin cancer and who are still tanning, and you wonder what's going on there. And this idea of tanning dependence has come into play in about the last 15 years maybe. So, tanning dependence back in 2004 was kind of first introduced into the literature by Feldman and his colleagues. They did a controlled blinded repeat choice trial that basically you had one bed and you had another bed. One bed admitted UV radiation, the other did not. Everything else looked the same. It was a small group of tanners. They were current frequent tanners who were engaged in this behavior, or in this study. And in 95% of the time, they chose the bed with UV radiation. Okay? So it led us to believe that there has to be something about this. They can tell a difference when there's UV present or when there's not. And again, a lot of the qualitative data had really led us into the idea of tanning dependence. People, again, tanning who had already had a diagnosis of skin cancer, or talking about having to get their fix. I've heard that specific language. So what we learned from that is that tanning is more like an opiate-like addiction than anything else. In 2006, Carr followed up with the idea that using I practiced this and I still messed it up. Naltrexone, which blocks endorphin in receptors, before frequent tanners went and tan, and 50% of them experienced withdrawal-like symptoms, including sweating, nausea, and the shakes. Which I think is really fascinating. I keep a question mark here with opiate-like addiction because we're not really 100% certain. The most common conceptualization is that there's a reinforcement mechanism with UV light that induces the production of pro-opiomelanocortin, which is thought to contribute to the regulation of stress, sleep patterns, and energy. Okay? That's really what the most current researchers are saying works. However, there is a body of literature that looks at serotonin that's being released, and that may be what's actually happening during the tanning session itself. So we're not 100% positive, but we'd like to know more, and we'd like to actually identify this behavior in large population groups. So, as all good social science researchers, how do we measure it? I don't know how familiar you all, or how often you work with this, but we talk a lot about measuring things and how good measures are. So here are the laundry list of current measuring devices for tanning dependence. Y'all might be familiar with the first two, although there's an odd M in front of them. So the first measurement for tanning dependence that came out in the literature was the idea of using the CAGE, the Cut Down Annoyed Guilty Eye Opener Scale, for alcohol dependence, but modifying it for indoor tanning behavior. This doesn't work. It's not an alcohol-like behavior. We think it's an opioid-like behavior. The next was the modified DSM-4, which looked at substance dependence disorders, but then was modified for indoor tanning. This doesn't work very well either. The internal reliability on it is very low. SITAD, the Structured Interview for Tanning Abuse and Dependence, was adapted from an opioid-like clinical diagnostic tool. It seems to work fairly well, although it's rather lengthy and a little bit difficult to score, especially when you're looking at like a population-based survey, which is what our research primarily works with. TAPS, the Tanning Pathology Scale, is a 17-item scale that measured tanning dependence. It was 16 items. And it looked at multidimensional tanning motives. And it seems to work fairly well in terms of its internal reliability, although it's not been tested on large population-based scales. The BATS, the Behavioral Addiction Tanning Scale, is a shortened 11-item scale that is specific towards dependence, and it was adapted from the TAPS. And that seems to be the most useful of the current measuring tools for tanning dependence. So, no to MCAGE, it really doesn't work. The behavior it overestimates dependence significantly. In one study, 40% of those who had been diagnosed as or labeled as tanning dependent had not tanned in the past month. And that's really not indicative of a tanning dependent behavior. At least not to me, it isn't. Interestingly, I did want to note before I move on to my personal interests, the U.S. Preventative Service Task Force and the Affordable Care Act have made counseling for indoor tanning in patients reimbursable. So that may be of interest. I just discovered that when I was preparing this, so I was pleased to see that. So tanning dependence, I have done a little bit of work with it, specifically showing an association between depression and tanning dependence, although more of my research is focusing on where tanning takes place. Location matters. This is Lancaster, Kentucky, the Tan and Tobacco Store. My favorite is the Tan and Fireworks Store in Morristown, Tennessee. I went to school in Danville, so Lancaster's not far from there. I'm from a rural area, and most often I don't think of tanning as Suntan City, but as the video store down the road. That was where tanning occurred. It was a very social behavior in the population I grew up in. Our band director had a tanning bed in her home, and she would invite people in the band to come and tan with her. I see several nodding heads who must be from rural areas. It's a really fascinating behavior that we have to understand some of those nuances of it to really be able to make a large, lasting impact on the behavior. So I'm very interested in tanning location. Specifically, tanning in gyms is of interest to me. A lot of gyms are offering free tanning with membership, so it's counterintuitive. You're doing this really healthy thing for your body and then this really not healthy thing for your body. So how can we alter messaging, or how can we tailor messaging for those kinds of individuals who may or may not do well with a solely appearance-focused messaging? I'm also very interested in policy. Indoor tanning in minors is huge. And I don't know this for certain, but I would say it's bigger in rural areas than in urban areas, specifically for minors. And there is a push from many organizations to call for a national ban on tanning in minors. Currently, there are 12 states who have bans on tanning in minors. There are 4 who have tanning 17 and under bans. In the state of Tennessee, we have a parental permission law between ages of 14 and 18. Under the age of 14, it's illegal to tan. 14 to 18, you have to have a parental permission slip on file that's updated annually. Above the age of 18, you're fine. That's actually been around since 92. We know a lot more about indoor tanning now than we did in 92. Also, policy level changes as far as the Food and Drug Administration and who oversees that. And some of those have come to fruition. So these are my personal interests with tanning. It is just an utterly fascinating topic. Tanning in the news, again, towards the end of the conversation. The ban for tanning in minors, you may or may not see that. I would encourage you all to pay attention to the news around tanning, because I think you'll be surprised how frequently you see it coming up. Tanning addiction has been in the news, maybe not so favorably. Tanorexia was the term that was kind of coined around tanning. It doesn't really have that kind of behavior associated with it. But Tan Mom, anybody remember her from 2012? So I think it was 2012, it may have been before then. So there have been some rather interesting stories about that. Again, the U.S. Surgeon General's call to action called a lot of attention towards tanning behaviors in particular, because it identified indoor tanning as one of the 5 goals to reduce skin cancer. And then the FDA reclassification of tanning beds. So up until May of last year, tanning beds were classified in the same category as tongue depressors. They're not anymore. The FDA also issued a black box warning to be placed on the device itself, but that only goes for new market items. That doesn't include your grandmother's bed that you inherited from the 80s that you're still using. So I think there's some kind of mechanical safety concerns as well around indoor tanning. As recently as Monday, actually, this was an article in the BBC magazine. And I just wanted to highlight that not only do we see dependence-like behaviors in the literature, we see tanners self-identifying as being addicts or dependent. And I think that that's powerful. This was a woman who was diagnosed with melanoma and has since, I believe, stopped tanning completely after her melanoma treatments. I like to provide resources for anyone who's interested in learning more, because I can only share with you so much. These are several sources that I've cited here in my conversation and that you can look up on your own. This PowerPoint will be archived as well. And then finally, I wanted to offer a thanks to Dr. Hopkins for inviting me to speak with you all, and then Dr. Hillhouse, my mentor, who has helped with this research as well. And I will take any questions at this time. I think questions are a lot more interesting. So, yes. Ooh, lots of questions. Yes, sir. Okay, good.
I want to start with the issue of tanning in minors.
Yes.
Aware of any place where parental involvement of a child with excessive tanning has been a child?
Oh. No.
Has that issue been raised?
Yes. So it's a really good question. The Tan Mom incidents, which happened in New Jersey about, I think it was about 4 years ago now. The concern was that a child was taken into the tanning bed with the mother and was allowed to tan, and then suffered severe burns. There was child services involved, is my understanding. It's been a long time since I've looked up that specific study, and that is the reason that there is now a ban for tanning minors in New York and New Jersey. So there have been some of those larger policy changes. I'm not aware of an individual lawsuit between a mother and child, in which child services has come into account. I could see there being basis for it.
Ban would apply to commercial camping. But if a parent has a in their home and they put their kid in it every day, is there any
It depends on how the law is written. So you kind of have three levels of places for tanning. You have the salons, like Tan 2000 or Suntan City. You have non-salon locations, which may be a hair salon that has a tanning bed, a gym that has a tanning bed, a video store, that kind of thing, where it's not the primary source of income for the business. And then you have home tanning. Most laws define tanning facility as both a home or both a salon unit and then a non-salon unit. But it really depends on how the law was written. Some don't include those tanning facilities, other locations. And it really doesn't cover the home usually. So it really, our laws just don't kind of have that space for it.
Then I got some questions about the opiate
Yes.
theory here. One of the things that's true of people who have opiate disorders is that there are typical life history factors that increase the risk of becoming an opiate user. For example, a history of early abuse
Okay.
sets somebody up for substance abuse college with opiates. Is there any research that links early life history to the risk of becoming dependent on cannabis?
So the question is there any research, I'm going to add that I'm aware of, that links opioid addiction to early age of initiation?
Early trauma to
Oh, okay, like adverse childhood?
exactly.
Okay.
We know that adverse childhood experiences can predispose to opiate use.
Right.
Can they also predispose to cannabis?
I am not aware of anything, but that is a great research question that I know someone who looks at adverse childhood effects that may be able to track that kind of, that would be potentially possible. I'm not aware of any that have done that, so. Okay.
And this is more common. You said something about seasonal affective disorder and how
Yes.
tanning beds didn't apply to that because of the theory that the light has to go through the eyes. There is somewhere in the seasonal affective disorder literature, and I'm sorry I can't generate the citation off my head, a report of a study which is a proof of concept study in which the light source was strapped to the back of somebody's knee.
Oh, interesting.
Still effective.
Still effective at that time.
So it may be that tanning, maybe through this mediated effect on endorphins, is improving mood through a different mechanism than
In the eyes. Yeah, it's certainly interesting. I'd like to read that article. Thank you for sharing. Other questions? Yes, sir, and then we'll jump back over here.
Before I get to the question, in terms of Tom just mentioned, I don't think the study related to academic is actually replicated.
It was just conceptualized.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, and you really have to weigh the benefits versus the cost. If there's a healthier alternative for treating seasonal affect disorder than putting someone at risk for skin cancer, can we do that as opposed to treating with a tanning bed?
In terms of seasonal affective disorder, I don't know that tanning is recommended to anybody.
I have most routinely seen it reported as self-diagnosed and self-treated.
I do know for if you're an adult and you go to a tanning business, you've got to sign a release.
Your consent forms for minors, absolutely. For adults as well, there is a consent form that you're aware of the risks. How well those are actually completed is up for some debate, especially in non-salon locations.
I may have missed it for your early presentation. In terms of all the negative information here, has the rate of tanning seemed to go down?
No. Yeah. No, the rates seem to be on the rise, if anything. So. Yes, ma'am, and then we'll jump down here. Okay, the risk reward is really quite predominant. There is good research in the US, Italy, Sweden, and Malta. There was a study that kind of looked specifically at, we understand that this is an unhealthy behavior. Why are we still doing it? And it really was the short-term reward of looking better, feeling better that the individual experienced. You also see individuals who engage in the behavior perceiving it as their friends liking that. And so there is kind of that societal influence more on a peer level than on a media level that may be playing in. And again, I think the family structure really has a lot to do with it, kind of perpetuating the cycle of mothers or fathers who tan and their children engaging in the behavior as well. Tanning increases in college age students. That's kind of, there's about a third of all all 12th grade women in the U.S. have tanned, had tried tanning at some point, and that has been a steady increase from 8th grade to 12th grade. And then in high school or in college, you see a big jump as well. And part of it is just that I'm out from under mom and dad's, thumb. I'm going to try this. My friends are going who have gone with their parents previously, and that's my kind of thought process on it. It's actually thought to be a white affluent behavior. So kind of that's what we see most often. Depends on where you go. It can go up to as much as $160 per month, depending on the package that you get at a salon. You can tan at the BP down in Greenville for $3 a session. And if you own one in your own home, it's really the cost of maintenance, upkeep, and the electricity, which actually isn't that much, it seems. And you can rent them. You can get them on Craigslist if you trade a tractor. You can get them on. There are actually 2 tanning bed distributors in this area. One up near Rogersville and one up here in Unicoi. And they'll deliver them to your home and maintain them yearly for about $2,500 to $100 to $3,000 for a bed. Some do. So I can share a story about my sister, who is a redheaded, Irish, freckled, green-eyed girl who self-medicated for seasonal affect disorder in the winter, and she would slather herself with sunscreen and lay for 3 minutes. I think that was all that was recommended for the time that she would lay. Some people do that. Some people do put on sunscreen. Most do not. That's a fairly small portion of the population of tanners. Most use lotions to help enhance the tan, and so typically the salon will offer those lotions for sale, and you'll purchase those and use those. And some of them have tingling effects, which I'm not entirely certain what that's about. But people talk about different lotions helping them to get a better tan, better quality of tan. So. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Seasonal affective disorder. Right. I'm not familiar with that literature, so I can't answer that question. But I will certainly, if I come across it, I can send you any information. So you've had your hand up.
So my question is, maybe research that you have seen or personal experience, and particularly the population that stands for self-esteem, body image, and a social gathering.
Mm-hmm.
This groups of men and women going
Yep.
to tanning bed together on an initiative with bush sport, like spray painting and those types of things, with their body image and the city, and that increases mood as well.
Yeah. There is a large push towards spray tanning as a replacement for indoor tanning, or at least to use it as a harm reduction strategy. Spray tanning allows the convenience of altering the type of tan that you get a lot more often than laying in a tanning bed. You can kind of choose the level of darkness you may or may not get. There's still, even though spray tans have become leaps and bounds better than the orange that you got in the early 90s, a lot of individuals that I work with talk about, oh, you look awful, you look so orange. There's a lot of that myth still being seen. You also do see some conversations about it's just not, you don't get that relaxation from it. You know, you're sitting there naked and you've got your arms up and you have to turn around, and it's uncomfortable. It's not as relaxing. It's not that me time. Some people do report having spray tans brought into their homes where there's someone who's actually airbrushing you, and those do seem to be a little bit more popular for the social tanning aspect of it, in my experience.
I might have missed this at the beginning of the presentation. What percentage of the population is aging in?
10%. And 2 to 3 million teenagers. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating, certainly. Thank you for sharing. Was there a question over in this area? I saw a hand earlier. Okay, we'll go back to you, ma'am. Appearance-based. Appearance-based messaging. You're going to get older faster. Yes. Doesn't work, unfortunately. It may work in some, but really the appearance-focused messaging, leaps and bounds, tends to work better. We've seen that in both men and women. More research has been done in women around the behavior than in men. We actually don't know that much about males who engage in indoor tanning, so that is an area that is being investigated quite a bit. Although there is some research that shows in adolescent males who tan that they've also used steroids and been bullied and had perceived weight issues more frequently than non-tanners. So that to me is really interesting as well. As counseling? So the research that Dr. Hillhouse has done on appearance-focused messaging is actually a pamphlet. We have two different ones, a pamphlet geared towards college age and older kind of young adults. And they read that on their own, and that has been an effective messaging tool. There's also a website that has been developed that's geared more towards younger age that they can engage in. So it's really not even necessarily the one-on-one counseling, although that has been seen as well. Mm-hmm. There is. It's very expensive. Photo imaging has been used so you can actually do this with a 10 type if you put sunscreen on your face, but there are also UV photographing machines that can show you the damage that your skin has experienced. And some of the earliest work by Jackson and Aiken in kind of the mid-2000s used that in addition to appearance-focused messaging, but we found that just the appearance-focused messaging had better results than the UV photograph in our study samples. So there is some available images, certainly. Yes, sir. Yes.
Has anybody who has looked at changes in endogenous opiate function with tanning, see what happens to that when sunscreen is used?
Not that I'm aware of. Sunscreen is, it's interesting because kind of within the skin cancer prevention research field, there are people who do indoor tanning and there are people who do sunscreen, and they don't really mix very well yet. So I'm not as familiar with the sunscreen literature as, and a lot, but what I do know of it is a lot of it has been focused on kind of location-specific sunscreening messaging, so beaches, pools, and kind of promoting sunscreen use and sun safety behaviors in those places. In particular, I don't know that we've done any work with specific.
What I was thinking is that if sunscreen does not block the associated production that does reduce the cancer risk, that's going to have to take into consideration.
It's a thought. So, any other questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Ms. Florence, thanks for the great talk. Thank you all for being here. Please remember the evaluation forms on your way out, and please be safe on the roads as well.